There was a season in your life where you spent so much energy trying to figure people out. You'd lie awake, replaying conversations, trying to decode what someone meant, why they acted that way, what they really wanted from you. You replayed the same exchange 5, 10, 20 times in your head, trying to find the logic in behavior that had no logic in it. You bent yourself sideways, trying to understand people who never once lost a moment of sleep, trying to understand you. They weren't up at night, wondering how you were doing. They weren't asking themselves whether they'd hurt you. They were sleeping just fine while you were carrying the weight of a confusion that was never yours to carry in the first place. And while you were doing all of that, while you were working overtime just to make sense of them, you were stuck, frozen, spinning in a cycle that God never designed for you. A cycle that kept you focused outward, on them, on their behavior, on their approval or their rejection, instead of inward toward Him, toward healing, toward the version of yourself that He was trying to build this whole time. But something shifted. Maybe it happened slowly. Maybe it happened all at once in one prayer, one quiet night, one moment where something finally broke loose in your spirit. However it happened, it happened. And now those very same people cannot figure you out. The tables didn't just turn, they flipped completely. The very confusion they caused you is now sitting on their doorstep, and they don't know what to do with it. That's what we're talking about today. Why the people who once confused you now find themselves confused by you. Why your peace doesn't add up to them. Why your stillness makes them nervous. Why your refusal to chase makes them suddenly feel like they're losing something. And why none of that is an accident. Not a single bit of it. Let's start with the foundation. Because before anything else makes sense, you have to understand this one truth. Isaiah 55:8 says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord." Read that slowly. Let it land. God's ways don't follow human logic. And here's the thing. When you are being genuinely guided by the Spirit of God, the things He moves you to do are going to look strange to the people around you. Your peace is going to look strange. Your stillness is going to look strange. Your refusal to react is going to look strange. And that's not a problem. That's actually the confirmation that you're walking in something real. See, they mistreated you. They revealed who they really were. And instead of matching their energy, instead of firing back, breaking down, becoming bitter, you showed up with love, with peace, with light. And that confused them. Because in the world they operate in, those are not the rules. In their world, if someone hurts you, you hurt them back. If someone plays games, you play games. But you stopped playing. And that move right there, that decision to stop chasing, stop decoding, stop contorting yourself to fit into spaces that were never meant for you, that's when everything changed. Now think about what God has done throughout Scripture for the people who walked in alignment with Him. In Exodus, He said He would send His terror before His people, that their enemies would turn their backs and flee. Not because His people were stronger, not because they were louder or more aggressive, but because the presence of God on their lives created something their enemies couldn't decode or defeat. And it's the same for you now. Psalm 121 puts it plainly. The Lord watches over you day and night. He does not slumber. He keeps you from evil and oversees everything you do, now and always. Think about that for a second. Not sometimes, not when you've earned it, not on your best days, always. Every step you've taken, even the painful ones, even the seasons where everything felt like it was falling apart, even the nights you weren't sure you were going to make it through, God was watching. He was guarding. He was placing limits on how far the attack could go. Job knew this. Job lost everything in what looked like a series of catastrophic collapses. His livestock, his children, his health. Everything stripped away. And yet Scripture shows us something remarkable. Satan had to ask permission. Every attack had a boundary. God said, "This far and no further." And even within that boundary, even in the most devastating season of Job's life, God was working, refining, rebuilding. producing something in Job that couldn't have come any other way. The Job at the end of the story was not the same man as the Job at the beginning. He was deeper. He was rooted in a way that only fire can produce. David knew this too. A shepherd boy, overlooked by his own father, sent to the fields, while his brothers were presented to the prophet. And yet God said, "That's the one." Daniel knew it. Thrown into a den of lions, and walking out unscathed. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, walking into a furnace that killed the men who threw them in, and coming out without even the smell of smoke on their clothes. Not a thread singed. This is the pattern. This is what God does for the people who walk in alignment with Him. Divine protection doesn't mean you'll never go through pain. It means the pain has a purpose, and it has a limit. It means that what was designed to destroy you ends up defining you in ways your enemies never anticipated. The furnace is real, the lion's den is real, but so is the God who walks in with you and walks you out the other side. So when I say they can no longer read you, I want you to understand that this isn't just about emotional growth, as real as that is. This is about the supernatural protection of God on your life, making you genuinely difficult to navigate for people whose intentions toward you were never pure. You're not just healed, you're guarded, and that changes everything about how you move through the world. Now here's what really throws them off. They can't tell if you're warm or cold. They can't get a read on your emotional state. And for people who have spent years learning how to manipulate others through emotional triggers, that is terrifying. They learned your old patterns like a map. They knew which buttons to press. They knew that if they did this, you'd react that way. If they said that, you'd spiral into this. If they pulled away, you'd come running. They had you charted. They thought they knew exactly how you worked. But you're not that person anymore. Now you walk in, and there's this calm about you that doesn't match what they think you should be feeling. You should be angry. You've got every reason in the world to be angry. You should be resentful, bitter, visibly wounded. You should be walking around with that hurt on your face, in your posture, in the way you talk. That's what they expected. That's what they prepared for. But you're not doing that. You're showing up with something that looks like peace. Something that, honestly, looks like joy. And that doesn't compute for them. They've run the equation, and the answer doesn't make sense. This person went through all of that, and they're standing there with light in their eyes. Some of them have been playing emotional games for so long that when they see someone not playing, their first assumption is that it must be a strategy. They think you're running a long game. They think the calm is a performance. They assume you're waiting to make a move. Because in the world they operate in, nobody just genuinely heals. Nobody just genuinely lets things go. Nobody just genuinely decides to move on in peace and love and stop carrying resentment like a weapon. That's not in their playbook, but it's in yours. Because it came from somewhere they don't have access to. And here's what I want you to hold on to. Your peace isn't a performance. It's not armor you strap on in the morning and take off at night. It came out of something real. It came out of surrender. Out of the decision to stop carrying what God never asked you to carry. Out of the hours you spent in prayer, in silence, in grief, in letting go. Out of choosing healing, even when it hurt more than the wound. Out of choosing God over and over again, even on the days when the pain was loud and His voice felt quiet. That peace is earned. It's anointed. It carries the weight of real transformation behind it. And no, they cannot read it, because it doesn't come from this world. It comes from a place they haven't been, and until they go through their own surrender, they won't understand it. Some of them never will. They handed you lemons. You know that old saying. They handed you lemons and the expectation was that you'd be sour, that the bitterness would define you, that you'd carry their toxicity around like a brand they put on you. But you made lemonade. And then you made a whole meal. And they're standing there completely baffled, watching you eat well at a table they thought they left empty. They used you like a black sheep. They made you feel like an outcast, like you were too much or not enough, like you were the problem in every room you walked into. They passed the narrative around that you were difficult, that you were unstable, that your expectations were unreasonable. And for a while, you believed it. Because when the people closest to you repeat a story about who you are long enough, it starts to feel like the truth. That's how the enemy works, through familiar voices, through people who know you well enough to know where the wounds are. But you stopped believing it. Somewhere along the way, in the middle of the pain and the tears and the wrestling with God at midnight, you stopped believing their version of you, and you started walking in His version. The version that says you are chosen. The version that says your calling is real. The version that says what was done to you didn't disqualify you. It actually prepared you. That shift, right there, is what made you unreadable. Does it still hurt sometimes? Yes. I'm not going to stand here and tell you the deception didn't leave a mark. The betrayal, the manipulation, the people who smiled to your face and worked against you in the background, of course, that left something. Healing isn't the absence of the wound. Healing is what happens when you stop picking at it and let God close it on His terms. You've learned your lesson. You've surrendered. You've let go, and you're still letting go, because some things don't release all at once. They release in layers, on God's timeline, not yours. But here's what matters. Every step you take right now is ordered, covered, protected. No one can reach into your energy and manipulate it the way they used to. That door is closed. They lost the access code when you stopped needing their validation to feel whole. No one controls your peace anymore. No one controls your emotions, your attention, your time, your resources. You used to give all of that away freely to people who didn't honor it. You used to overextend yourself, over-explain yourself, over-give to people who took it all, and then complained about what you couldn't give. That season is over. Now you understand that these things are sacred. Your time is sacred. Your emotional energy is sacred. Your love is sacred. And you get to decide prayerfully, intentionally, who receives them. The challenges you walked through were fire. And fire does two things. It destroys or it refines. In your case, it refined. Every adversity was a lesson wrapped in pain. Every betrayal was a teacher you didn't ask for but needed. Every moment you thought you were being broken down, God was actually building something up. A version of you that is settled, that is rooted, that cannot be easily shaken, cannot be easily manipulated, and cannot be put back in the box they tried to keep you in. Now, I want to take a moment here, because what you're walking in right now is real, and it's deep. And I know some of you are in the thick of this right now, trying to understand not just why things happened, but what comes next, where you are in this journey, what God is actually doing in this season. There are messages that pass through your eyes, and there are messages that pass through your spirit. If something in you recognized itself while watching, don't dismiss it. That is the Spirit confirming what was already written. The secret protocol carries 7 keys that unveil what heaven deposited in you before you ever arrived. Things no one around you has ever been able to name. It comes with the full audiobook for your moments of prayer, silence, and encounter with God. And you also receive the Awakening Map, the guide that illuminates the 5 seasons of spiritual awakening, revealing with precision exactly where you are and what comes next. The link is pinned in the first comment, but only for a limited time. Don't let this moment pass without a response. Now, let's talk about something that I think doesn't get said enough. They can't read you anymore, and part of what makes that so disorienting for them is that the attraction is still there. They still feel drawn to you. They still notice you. They still bring you up in conversations. But it feels different now, because you're no longer chasing. You're no longer working for their attention. You're no longer adjusting yourself to fit whatever version of you they found convenient. You pulled back. You took your piece of the table and you walked away quietly, without drama, without a long speech, without the kind of explosive ending they probably expected from you. Just quietly, firmly, walked away. And the moment you did, the moment you withdrew your attention, your warmth, your time, your words of encouragement, your love, They felt it like a subtraction. Something was taken away, and they hadn't anticipated how much that would affect them. They thought they could replace you. They always think that, don't they? People who don't value what they have always assume there's more of it somewhere else. That your particular way of showing up for people, the specific, attentive, spirit-led way you love, could be found anywhere. They were wrong. Because you are not replaceable. Not what you carry. Not how you love. Not the divine quality you bring into every room, every relationship, every conversation. And they discovered that the hard way. Now they're sitting with a gap they didn't plan for and cannot fill. That gap? That's God's signature on your life. That's the evidence that you were never ordinary, even in the seasons when people treated you like you were. Walking away was not weakness. It was one of the most spiritually courageous things you could have done, because it redefined the terms without a single argument. It declared quietly, powerfully, that your presence is a privilege, that your love is not something people are automatically entitled to, that you will not continue pouring yourself out for people who have made their contempt for your worth very clear. And now the only way they can make sense of you is to watch you from a distance, still radiant, still growing, still moving toward what God has for you. And they will watch. Because light, even from a distance, is hard to look away from. Here's something I want you to sit with for a moment. Some of you have entered a season of isolation, a real hermit season. Just you, your home, your Bible, your quiet conversations with God. Maybe some worship music in the background at night when the silence gets heavy. And in that season, in that stillness, you didn't necessarily choose, but that God orchestrated something happened. Something nobody around you may have named yet. You started to glow, not in a showy, outward way, not in a way that announces itself, in a deep way, a rooted way, the kind of glow that only comes from real stillness and real surrender. And when you do re-emerge, when you walk back into rooms, back into conversations, back into the spaces where you used to shrink people, notice something different about you. They can't always articulate what it is. They just feel it. A settled confidence, a clarity in your eyes, a peace that doesn't perform for anyone, a quiet authority that you didn't have before. That's what the isolation has been building. That's the gift buried inside the season that felt like burial. Now let's talk about the last thing, and honestly the hardest one. Your divine union, whether that's a romantic relationship, a marriage, a deep friendship, a ministry partnership, has started to look like an ending. Not because you wanted that, not because you stopped caring or stopped loving them, but because their choices, the games, the negativity, the refusal to grow, the inability to honor what God was building between you, have made it nearly impossible for the connection to continue in a healthy way. You kept showing up with love. You kept pouring positivity into something that kept springing leaks. You kept trying to build in soil that the other person kept salting. And God has been watching that. He sees the consistency of your effort. He sees the generosity of your love. He sees everything you gave that they didn't receive properly. He also sees what they chose over and over again when faced with the opportunity to do better. Here's the truth. What God ordains, He also protects. But it takes two people to honor what He builds. You cannot carry the full weight of a divinely ordered connection while the other person actively works against it. You are not failing this relationship. They are failing their assignment in it. And there is a significant difference between those two things. The remarkable thing is you're not even engaging with their games anymore. They run their old strategies, expecting the old reactions. They push certain buttons, expecting you to spiral. They pull away, expecting you to chase. But you've stepped off that board entirely. You're not competing. You're not retaliating. You're not fighting for a version of things that no longer exists. You're simply moving forward, in faith, trusting God with the outcome. And that trust, that posture of surrender, is the most powerful thing you can stand in right now. Maybe you don't know yet if this is a final ending or a long pause. Maybe the uncertainty itself is its own kind of weight, this not knowing that keeps you up at night sometimes. That's okay. You don't need the answer today. What you need and what you already have is a posture of surrender. Open hands, trusting that God's ways are higher, that what looks like loss might be preparation, that what feels like an ending might actually be the door opening into something more aligned with who you've become. That posture, that willingness to say, I don't know, but I trust you, Lord, that is not defeat. That is one of the most spiritually mature positions a person can stand in, because it means you've stopped insisting that things go the way you planned, and you've opened your hands to receive what God has actually prepared. There is something powerful in you right now, something being forged in this season that will serve you for decades. And I want you to know I see it. Even if no one around you is naming it, I see the courage it takes to keep showing up after everything you've been through, to keep loving without bitterness, to keep moving without a clear map, to keep choosing God when the road has been longer and harder than you expected. They can no longer read you. And that's not because you've become cold or hard or closed off to the world. It's because you've become genuinely free. Free from the need to be understood by people who were never meant to understand you. Free from the cycle of proving yourself to those who had already decided who you were before you walked into the room. Free from the emotional labor of managing other people's comfort at the expense of your own peace. You're not that person anymore. You haven't been for a while now, and they can feel it. So here's my question for you today, and I want you to actually answer this in the comments. I read every single one of them. I see you. Is there one specific moment you can point to, a single decision, a single prayer, a single act of letting go, where you felt the shift happen? Where something in you finally released? Where you stopped chasing and started attracting? Where you knew, deep in your spirit, that you had crossed a threshold and there was no going back to who you used to be? Tell me about that moment. I want to hear it, because your testimony is somebody else's turning point. And you being here, still seeking, still growing, still choosing God in the middle of everything that matters more than you know. I love you. Keep walking forward.